Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on today's webinar, 5 Tips to Successfully Launch a Diversity Initiative at Your Nonprofit. I'm Nicole Jones from TechSoup, and I will be your host today. So we've got a lot of excellent content to cover today, but before we get there, let's just do a little bit of housekeeping on how to use Global Meet. So if you have any questions throughout today's presentation, feel free to chat them and we will get to them. Just a note that all lines are muted, and should you lose your internet connection, it totally happens. Feel free to reconnect using the link that was emailed to you. And you can find upcoming webinars and past ones all archived on the TechSoup website. And that link is a little hard to read. It's techsoup.org/community/events-webinars. And a note that you're also going to receive an email with this presentation, so you can look back at anything you might have missed or want to revisit. So this webinar is brought to you by TechSoup. TechSoup's a global network bridging tech solutions and services for good. More than 1.2 million nonprofits in 236 countries and territories have benefited from TechSoup and recognize TechSoup as their unique resource partner. Oops, skipping ahead there. And this is made possible with the support of more than 100 corporate donors and providers of software, hardware, and services who've chosen TechSoup to create and grow impactful in-kind donation programs with. My webinar system's being a little funky. That's okay. We're still moving along here. So you can learn more about all these offerings from changemakers like yourself and how you can take advantage of them by visiting our nonprofit tech marketplace. And that's at techsoup.org/get-product-donations. And we'll include all these links in your follow-up email, so no need to memorize this now. And should also note that TechSoup is much more than just a tech marketplace for getting great deals on software and hardware for your nonprofit. We also offer online and offline communities to foster collaboration and peer learning opportunities, in addition to useful tech resources and tips through TechSoup's free blog, webinars like this one here today, forums and articles, that plus our Apps for Good division called Caravan Studios, where we collaborate with experts to create and curate relevant solutions that help communities around the world. All right, and with that, on to the main event. Would like to make some introductions here. On today's webinar, we're joined by Lashika Phillips. She is Program Manager of NGO Source and Grantmaker Success. NGO Source is a project of the Council on Foundations and TechSoup. It uses technology to help U.S. grant makers streamline their international giving. As NGO Source's Program Manager, Lashika oversees and coordinates various projects, relationships, and other strategic initiatives across the program. She also spearheaded TechSoup's Inclusion and Diversity Initiative in October 2019. And since then has developed an internal employee committee named BRIDGE, which stands for Building Respect, Inclusion, Diversity, and Global Equity, where she helps create events, activities, and other opportunities to champion our TechSoup values. And we're also joined by Cleo Charpentier. She is an intern at NGO Source, and an awesome one at that. We're very lucky to have her. She's a recent graduate of Occidental College in Los Angeles, where she studied philosophy and economics. And while here, she's helped get the TechSoup Diversity Initiative off the ground and is excited to share some tips from this experience with all of you webinar participants today. And they're joined by me. Again, my name is Nicole Jones, and in addition to Stephen Davidson, who will be helping to answer your questions along the way. And with that, I would love to hand it over to Lashika and Cleo for today's presentation.
Thanks, Nicole, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, my name is Cleo. I'm going to get us started with an overview of facts and statistics about diversity within the nonprofit workplace, and then from there we'll move into some more information about TechSoup's diversity initiative and how you can, imitate that at your own nonprofit. Create your own. So for starters, the nonprofit workplace the nonprofit workforce makes up about 10% of the U.S. workforce as a whole. So our diversity practices matter. We're the third largest sector in the U.S., so that's not nothing. And the diversity sector has a very diverse employee base. Women make up the majority of employees. I know that's really true here at TechSoup. Some estimates say that about 3/4 of the nonprofit employees are women, so that's pretty significant. And then there's a range of statistics for diversity, for racial diversity, and there's something between 20% and 40% of the nonprofit employees are people of color. And given that 30% of the workforce throughout the U.S. is non-white, falling within a 20 to 40% range, it's a good happy medium. So that's slightly less than half of the nonprofit workforce is non-white, according to the study. But as I said, these statistics, some range here. The 2015 study found that it's actually 18% of nonprofit staff and 22% of foundation staff that are people of color. So a little bit of wiggle room there. But across the board, the employee base of the nonprofit sector is pretty diverse. However, these numbers don't translate to the leadership level. So there's a lot of inequality at the leadership level. So Leading with Intent, which does an annual study about nonprofit diversity, has found that 70% of chief executive positions are held by women of color. So in comparison to female chief executives across the board throughout the U.S., that's a high percentage, definitely worth celebrating, but it's not flawless because the bigger the organization and the bigger its annual budget, the less likely it is to have a woman leader at the top. GuideStar found that U.S. nonprofits' annual budgets of more than $50 million, out of those, only 18% had a female CEO. So that's not representative of that 70% employee workforce that is female. And the women who do hold these positions are often paid less than their male counterparts. So the Chronicle of Philanthropy reports that female CEOs at nonprofits with a budget of $2.5 million are paid 23% less than male people in the same position. So that's quite a gap. And boards, too, are often less diverse than the organizations they oversee. Only about 40% of board members are women. So that means that predominantly male boards are overseeing organizations with predominantly female staff. So the leadership is not representative of the gender makeup of the organization they lead. And that's just talking about gender. Then along racial lines, the racial diversity at the top is even worse and less representative. There's a really big disconnect here. So only about 10% of CEO positions at nonprofits are held by people of color. So that means that 90%, as we see here in the statistics we have in front of us, 90% of executives, 90% of board chairs, and 84% of board members are white. That is really striking, especially when you remember that something close to 40% of the nonprofit workplace is made up of people of color. And we can really see that disconnect here in this graph, which is produced by the Center Equity in the Center guide about this issue. And so the lack of racial diversity on boards hasn't increased much. 2017 Leading with Intent study saw that there was no increase from years prior and very, very unlikely to have positive growth in the future given the existing hiring pipeline. And lastly, 50% of boards of nonprofits are not just very white, but exclusively white, meaning they have no members of color at all. Pretty striking. So there's clearly a big gap between the racial compositions of boards and the organizations they oversee and the community they serve as well. And interestingly, Leading with Intent has polled boards on their views about diversity, and they found that the majority of board members surveyed reported valuing diversity and having discussed the importance of internal diversity. However, only a minority of those boards reported actually developing a plan to increase diversity. So there's this ideal that is disconnected from the action or the plans put into place. And there's also this lack of leadership of color can't be explained by a lack of interest or a lack of unqualified applicants. There's clearly some of both. And so it must come down instead to some structural issues that prevent employees of color from progressing up the ranks. And yeah, this has even been named by some as a black ceiling, to take on the glass ceiling. So someone speaking about their experience said that they faced a black ceiling uh, and were unable to move up to the leadership they wanted to move to. So all that to say that the leadership within the nonprofit sector is not representative of the employee base, and it's not representative of the diversity of the populations they're serving either. And even if some effort has been made, there's increasing attention paid to this. There's so far been little measurable change in recent years. And two, I've only talked here about gender and racial diversity, but obviously there are so many different axes of diversity that we could talk about, and some might just be slightly less easy to measure than the two I've mentioned here. But it's pretty striking that within the nonprofit sector, a sector that prides itself on being a champion for change, there's been very little change so far within diversity at the leadership level. So I'll move on here to our next slide. So with all that information, it's clear that the field is not yet very diverse or inclusive, or at least not as much as it wants to be or as much as it aspires to be. But before jumping into how to develop an initiative to remedy this, it's worth going over a few reasons why diversity is beneficial to nonprofits and workplaces in general in the first place. So we'll look at a few reasons why diversity matters at the workplace. So it's beneficial, having a diverse workforce is beneficial to both external activities and engagement and to internal operations and administration. Internally, it's been shown that a diverse team is a more innovative team. By bringing in new ideas and perspectives, by taking on new views, it makes room for more innovative thinking. So it makes teams have to, making time to draw out different diverse points of view and diverse perspectives can make for more innovative thinking and more creative problem solving. And there's also been studies that show that a diverse team can be a more cohesive team. So this is a team that's more supportive of each other, they're more careful in their information processing, and both of those things combined contribute to a lower turnover rate for organizations that are more diverse. There hasn't been any clear explanation for this, but it's been shown statistically that a more diverse team has a lower turnover rate, and it's probably something to do with the innovative thinking that makes it a dynamic workplace and the cohesive teams that make it a really engaging place to work. And then thinking again about the leadership, a board and a leadership team that matches the internal diversity of a staff is better equipped to respond to its staff needs. So that's another positive benefit of diversity at the leadership level. And then we can think too about some external benefits of diversity. So a organization with a diverse staff and leadership is more likely to be able to respond to the diverse needs of communities if it's serving a diverse community. And that can also, interestingly, draw in a wider range of donors and volunteers because those donors and volunteers might be interested in working with a diverse organization. And additionally, a diverse workplace fosters a positive cycle of diversity. So in thinking about hiring, we often hire with those we know. We often hire within the circles we know. So a team that is predominantly white is more likely to hire who looks like them and who happens to be white as well. But a diverse team will tap into their more diverse networks, and so would be more likely to hire a new member who is more diverse as well. And so there's a positive cycle to diversity, and the more existing diversity, the more diversity you are likely to create. And all of this together can really help inspire others, and both in your community and within the nonprofit world, to aspire to more diversity as well. So these are just some general benefits to diversity. There's probably plenty other that are less easy to measure and less easy to pinpoint, but these are some of the ones I found really interesting in my readings. So let's see. I'll talk briefly also about what makes up diversity, and so it's important here to remember that diversity is not enough in and of itself. A diverse staff isn't the end-all, be-all. When thinking about DEI often stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So all three of those elements need to go together, and we need to make room for community and for making sure that those diverse members of a staff are included in the decision-making process and represented, and all the rest. So I'll pause there, and I'll pass it along to my colleague Lashika for now. But excited to see your questions as they come through.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Cleo. I really appreciate all of the work that you put into combing through all of this research, because there is a ton of research available about the impact of having a diverse team and inclusive team, and highlighting global equity. Like, there's so much research, so I really appreciate you putting all of that together to kind of give us an idea of the trends and what is happening in the nonprofit world as it relates to DEI. And so, of all of the research that's out there, there was a quote that I saw in a report that Civica's, they published in January of 2020. And so I want to start with a quote here from their report. And this says, civil society is often at the forefront of tackling inequality and exclusion around the world. Yet, these external activities are not always reflected in the internal operations of civil society organizations. While there is broad recognition of the significant value that recognizing and enabling diversity and inclusion can bring to organizations, the truth is that when we hold a mirror up to ourselves, we still see that there is a lot to be done to achieve real and tangible change in civil society in terms of diversity and inclusion. And I believe that everything that you just shared, it definitely speaks to this quote here. So thank you again for that. And so with that, now that we know that, yes, there is change that has to happen within our organizations, just like the change that we are pushing out to help other organizations and other people in the community. And so with that, I want to share what TechSoup did. I want to share our approach in hopes that our approach will help you begin to think of ways to implement a DEI initiative at your organization, or perhaps you already have one. So we're hoping that this conversation today, the information that we shared with you today, will just ignite you to go back to your program and think of other ideas that you can bring, and maybe think of other people that you can include. And so, again, thank you so much for being here. So I want to talk about, I'm sorry, that's not the slide I want to jump to. I want to jump here to our TechSoup approach. And as you can see here, that we did several things. One of the first things that we did to implement a DEI program, well, first I have to say that before TechSoup launched this official DEI initiative, I must say that being diverse and being inclusive is a part of our mission. So there were already things happening and in place within our organization that definitely speaks of DEI, and it definitely speaks of an inclusive space and environment for the employees of TechSoup. What we wanted to establish is that we wanted to show that on a larger scale, that yes, it's a part of our mission, but what are we actively doing, right? What are we intentionally doing as it relates to DEI? And so with the help of our wonderful executive team, our CEO, and our people and culture team at TechSoup, we were able to take the month of October to use that as our kickoff time. So we chose October because October is National Global and Diversity Awareness Month, okay? And we took October and we organized several events and presentations and activities for our entire organization to be a part of. And so that was our kickoff, okay? So from that, one of the first activities that we asked people to engage in was to create a poster. And so this poster was something that was really simple. We provided templates, and we even provided some language to get people started. So we included different statements that people could use on their posters. So for instance, on a poster, it may read, I enjoy that TechSoup is global because I get to meet people from various backgrounds and walks of life. And that really, really impacts my life in a positive way. And so it was something like that, along those lines. So we had those posters, and we printed them out, and they were all over our building. And we even shared them online for the staff that's not in our headquarters in San Francisco. And so they were able to be engaged and involved in that activity as well. We would not be able to do all of these activities and really have employment engagement the way that we did and the way that we continue to if we did not collaborate with our HR team and our marketing team. HR, because that's the heart of DEI, right? That is definitely a people and a culture aspect. And so that is why we felt the need to collaborate with our HR team. And it was equally important to collaborate with our marketing team because it was important for us that the word gets out, that our employees know that this is something that is important to us, and we want them to be active. We want them to be involved. And so I highly recommend, as you are thinking about ways to implement a DEI initiative at your program, at your nonprofit, think of the teams around you that can really add value to what you're trying to do. Another thing that we decided to do was to use special days and holidays as a way of engagement. So not too long ago, last month actually, we celebrated Lunar New Year at TechSoup. And so we had a potluck, and people brought in all types of food items. We had a nice celebration at the office. We even had people to share their stories, how they celebrated with their family. And it was really, really great. It was a huge turnout. So many employees participated in that. It helps with morale. It helps with community building. It was really great. The other thing that we did, in addition to inviting external speakers to come and speak, we also used our own employees for some of the presentations that we had. There was one presentation that I just absolutely love to talk about, and that was the presentation that we had on neurodiversity. If you've never heard of neurodiversity, I challenge you. As soon as this webinar is over, go search it out. Neurodiversity. So I had never heard of that term before, but when one of my colleagues said, hey, I see that we're doing a lot of DEI things. Are you doing something for neurodiversity? I said, neurodiversity? Of course. Well, at that time, I didn't quite understand what that meant. I mean, I understood neuro and diversity, and I understood what that meant together, but what does that mean here in the workplace? And I was amazed. I just started doing some research and sat down with my coworker, and we talked about his experience. And he was a part of he was the presenter actually for a talk that we had on neurodiversity. And just to give you a quick spoiler alert, so neurodiversity was a term that was coined several years ago, but it was around autism. So at TechSoup, what we did is we took the term neurodiversity and we kind of stretched it because we understand that although someone may not be autistic, they may be dealing with bipolar, or they may be dealing with Alzheimer's, or any situation like that. So it was important for us, and it is still important for us to show that, everyone is welcome, and not just welcome here, but you're accepted, you are valued, and we make accommodations for you the best way that we can, because we are a team, and it was really, really great. So I highly encourage you. You've not taken a dive into neurodiversity, and you think that that's something that would be beneficial to your organization, I highly recommend you to do that. At least have a presentation about it, or think about it. Think of ways that you can really incorporate something like that in your organization. So I know that I shared a lot of things that we did, and I feel like that doesn't even really scratch the surface of what we've done. But since then, because it's really important for the executive team and the leaders at TechSoup to say, it's not just about checking the box. So what are we going to do? So what we did is every month since October, we have been very intentional about different events and presentations that we offer to our employees. And so right now it's February, and we are celebrating Black History Month. And so a few things that we did this month is we had a book talk where we featured a book by Ta-Nehisi Coates called Between the World and Me. That was amazing. We also had a movie screening of a civil rights documentary. And in a few days, we're going to have a musical tribute from all of our employees here at TechSoup. There are tons of musicians here, so we're very fortunate to have them. And so we're going to do a tribute for Black History. And then next month, we're focusing on Women's History Month and Irish Heritage Month and several other things. And so we will have events around those various themes. So I know that we promised that we would give you 5 steps, and I feel like I've given I've given a few, but I want to make it really simple for you. I would say the first step and the first thing would be to survey your organization. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean a tangible survey that you send out to every single person. While that could possibly be a great idea, but for you to really identify within your organization, what are you currently doing as relates to DEI? And then what are some things that you would like to do? And why do you want to do those things? Start thinking about that. And come up with some type of plan, whether it's maybe we can offer one event a quarter or one event a month. Think about the capacity as well as you're surveying the needs and surveying the organization. Think about the capacity of the people who would be working on this program or on this development. Second, I would highly encourage nonprofits who are looking for ways to start their DEI program or to revamp it would be to take advantage of special days. Just like we took advantage of the fact that October was Global Diversity Awareness Month. Who knew? I didn't. Prior to that, I had no idea. So take advantage of that. I mentioned that we celebrated Lunar New Year. So we had a discussion about it. So yes, while we had lunch together, but we also had really great dialogue around Lunar New Year. One conversation that was brought up is we were promoting the event as Chinese New Year for a couple of days. And an employee reached out to me and said, hey, I think we need to change that. And I said, oh, really? Tell me why. And she explained, using Chinese New Year versus Lunar, because other people outside of China actually celebrate Lunar New Year. So having these conversations, that was profound for some people. They'd never heard that explained before. And so that was a learning moment, So take advantage of those special days that are coming up. And I actually have a great website for you if you're like, I don't know when holidays are, I don't know how to keep track of that. There is a wonderful website called Holidays Insights, and we can share that with the post-webinar follow-up with you. But it's holiday insights, and it kind of gives you an idea of what holidays are happening every day of the year. Now, I'm definitely not recommending that you do something every day. If you have the capacity to do it, go for it. Next, I would recommend that for your team to create simple activities where everyone can participate. For instance, the poster that I mentioned that we did, and it was really simple. We created the template. We created different statements for employees to use, so no one had to come up with their own design, and no one had to really think about what they wanted to say. Well, of course, they had to think about what they wanted to say, but at least, we gave them some phrases to kind of help them along the way, to kind of help guide them. And by us offering it online, as a digital poster, then it allowed our remote staff to participate, as well as our employees that are across the globe. They were able to participate in that as well. Also, I would say the next step would be to identify allies and partners across your nonprofit. Like I mentioned, we partnered with PNC, we partnered with marketing, but I also would challenge you even outside of your organization. I have attended several webinars and several conferences, and it really appears that the topic of DEI and inclusion and diversity is really trending right now, and there's a reason for that, and it's showing up at almost every conference, and there are people who are willing to partner with you to help you along the way. One great source that Cleo had mentioned, and where I just gave you the quote from, the Civicus report, there's so many tools and resources out there that help you. So I would say definitely identify those partners. And last and definitely not least, I would highly encourage for your team to create maybe an internal group. So let's say you don't have the capacity to have, for your HR team to start this initiative, right? There is an opportunity, though, for your organization to create an internal group, like a committee, like the one that TechSoup created, and we call it Bridge, BRIDGE. And Nicole talked about that earlier in the introduction, building respect, inclusion, diversity, and global equity. And that fits us perfectly because it's in line with our mission. So I would encourage you to think of other ways that you can get your employees engaged. And I really do think that having an internal employee resource group or some type of committee, maybe in addition with your HR team, would be very impactful. So that is what TechSoup did to get started, and we have not stopped. It's not going to stop. I will say that. It's definitely not going to stop. We definitely have the momentum, and we are excited about growing this program. So thank you, Nicole, for having Cleo and I here to share this information with all of our wonderful TechSoup members. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lashika. Thank you, Cleo, for sharing all these learnings, a lot of inspiration, a lot of just trying different things. But yeah, more than anything, learning from trying different elements of how to embrace diversity and inclusion in the workplace, specifically at a nonprofit. So we're going to move on now to questions, and keep those questions coming in. You can just add them right into the chat box. And with that, let's see, I'm just going to give a couple moments here to formulate your questions. I see some questions coming in. So why don't we start with this first one? Does our legal team have to be involved with the launching of a DEI initiative? Who'd like to take that one?
That is a great question, and it really depends on the structure of your organization. Fortunately, within TechSoup, I am really close with the our HR team, and I'm really close with, I work closely with our legal team. So when the idea came for us to do something, I feel that our legal team and our HR team was just naturally involved. I think that if you have a designated legal team at your organization, definitely, yes, get them involved, or at least let them know what your intention is and what you're trying to do. Do they have to be a part of the DEI program? Again, I think it depends on the structure of your organization. But I would want, best practice would be for your legal team to at least know and be aware that, that the organization is taking this on. Now, the legal team may even have some suggestions around what the organization can or cannot do. So I think best practice to at least let them be aware of what the organization is doing as it relates to different activities or engagement around the topic.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Lashika. We've got another question here. The question is, what programs do you recommend for creating flyers, announcements, things like that?
Sure. So we used, I'm trying to think of what we used. I actually, at this moment, I don't remember what we used. Every time that we did something, I do know once we used Adobe Spark. And that was really, really easy to use. It was straightforward. You could create not just flyers and announcements, but we even made a short video a couple of times using Adobe Spark. So I highly recommend that, just because of it's really user-friendly. and I'm trying to think of.
And it's available on our marketplace. It's available to TechSoup members.
It is. So I really can't think of any other programs that we would have used to create anything else, but definitely Adobe Spark would be a go-to tool for that.
We'll take it. Excellent. Thank you for that. Another question here is, how do you handle tough conversations as they're likely to come up with these topics?
Okay, because they won't ever come up, right?
Right.
Well, so the way that you handle them is you handle them. I think that's number one. I think that when a tough conversation comes up, that, because sometimes it causes us to feel uncomfortable, which then leads to us not wanting to deal with it because it's uncomfortable. And I think that in order for us to really be leaders in the sector and really be productive, we have to face those tough conversations. So the way that I've seen it handled at TechSoup is we really talk it through. There have been tough conversations that came up during our book talk, and very tough conversations. And I think that the best way to handle that is to, number one, listen. Like I said, don't ignore it is number one. And two is listen. That is number one. I feel like when we were having those sensitive conversations, those tough conversations, I can't imagine if the people who were involved in the dialogue felt as if they weren't unheard. I can imagine that conversation being escalated, or people not feeling that they were heard or feeling inadequate. So I think it's that, to listen, and then always provide or offer an opportunity for follow-up and feedback. There's nothing like having a tough conversation and then you just walk away. There's no resolution, and I understand that sometimes resolutions aren't discovered, right away or put into place immediately. But the fact that there is an opportunity set aside to follow up about that, I think that really, really helps the the process and it helps the conversation. And I think that when it's done that way, where we don't ignore it, that we listen and then we follow up, I think that encourages and it inspires people and empowers people actually to share more, to speak more, to get involved more. So that's what I would say to that. Oh, Cleo was yes, and then Cleo was involved in our book talks as well. I'd be curious to see what she'd say about the tough conversations.
Sure. Yeah. As you said, we had these wonderful book talks about Between the World and Me, which is a book that deals with questions of American racism and what it is to be Black in America. So really very interesting content material, and I think everybody came to it with like a very unique perspective. So yeah, I really appreciated those discussions, and I think, as you said, giving time for those discussions was really important. I think also having a physical space for those conversations was really helpful. Of course, we had these discussions available over Zoom for those who were remote or working from home from the day, but I, in person, would attend in, our designated conference room for these events, and having a space that was closed off from interruption and silent as could be, meant that we could really get into these conversations, and I thought that was really helpful. So if you have the opportunity to designate a room, make some physical space for these conversations so that people feel safe to engage in a topic and to go into it at length, that's really beneficial. I would also add that there's a wealth of resources online for more tangible steps for how to handle some of these conversations. So I'm thinking particularly of this diversity toolkit put out by USC called A Guide to Discussing Identity, Power, and Privilege. This is, again, a resource we can link to in the chat or in our email to come next. But so this has a lot of leading questions about how to talk about diversity and identity and how to talk through some of those issues. There's also a wealth of resources that will have, for example, dictionaries about diversity with important keywords and definitions for those keywords, because sometimes we can have these conversations and be using the same words but not really not talking about them in the same way or not agreeing on definitions. So having a starting point of understanding of this is how we're using these words in this context can be really helpful. So these might be for more structured conversations or for more structured events, but I would just absolutely recommend turning to one of these toolkits that are available online that have a lot of really great pointers and really important resources. So there's plenty out there to guide you through these conversations.
Thanks for that, Cleo. And let's see, I think we've got 2 more questions that we can answer, and keep your questions coming. Again, you can just type them below in the chat box, and we'll be sure to get to them. So next question here, this is a good one, and definitely something that is limited for nonprofits, which is time. What if you don't have time to dedicate to a DEI initiative? Who'd like to tackle that one?
Okay, so I don't have the time to launch a DEI initiative. No, I'm joking. I totally get that concern, and it is definitely relevant. So I don't want to be dismissive at all. I'm joking about that because being a part of this initiative and being a part of what we're doing in TechSoup for DEI, it's not a part of NGO Source. As Nicole mentioned in the intro, I work for a program within TechSoup called NGO Source. So I understand not having time because this is kind of outside of my sphere of, my day-to-day work. So I think that if time is an issue, again, it goes back to my first step, survey your nonprofit. That means, finding out what limits there are, and if time is an issue, then maybe you won't be able to produce all of these, all of the ideas that we were able to produce, which is fine, but something like a poster or having places set up, like Cleo said. It was very important that there was an actual space set aside just to have those conversations. Whether it's a potluck, with your team. I think that while time is an issue, I do believe that if inclusion and diversity and global equity is something that your nonprofit is serious about and is passionate about, I do believe that there are creative ways to still be engaged. And depending on the resources, after you survey your organization, you may not have time, but there may be an opportunity to outsource DEI assistance. Again, it's all in when you survey your organization to see, are there additional resources for that? There may be other people, so you may not necessarily have time, but there may be other people within the organization that have time. Like I said, I joked about, okay, I don't have time for DEI, but you know what? I don't. But there are several other people within the organization who do. And so at this very moment, there's a team of people who are working on events behind the scenes that are coming up because I just don't have the time to. So I think this is a beautiful opportunity for delegation. It's a beautiful opportunity to engage other employees. You may have someone who is an excellent graphic designer, at your team, at your nonprofit, and maybe they're looking for a new project. This will be a great opportunity for them. So I think there's an opportunity to be creative when we feel that time is an issue. So I would definitely look into that. Survey your organization, see what opportunities there are without focusing on the limits. And like I said, there may be an opportunity internally. There may even be an opportunity to partner with someone outside of your nonprofit.
I'll add to that there's a lot of creative workarounds if time is an issue. I know we talked a lot about actual in-person events we held here as part of our diversity initiative, but another thing we did for Black History Month this month is we in one of our Slack channels, so in one of our internal communications, we posted weekly or daily, depending on the week, resources about Black history and cultural things of the nature. So those were not very time intensive, but just good ways of getting a conversation started and a conversation. So these were conversations had virtually for us through our Slack, but if you're not using Slack, this could be through email or any other means like that. So I think that's just one of the many creative ways that we worked around time as an issue, so we could have conversation virtually and also could spark a conversation in a less time-intensive way. So there's also plenty of creative solutions if time is here.
Yes, love that. Yes, focus on the opportunities and that low-hanging fruit. So online, offline, there's lots of different ways to engage. Thank you for that. And I think, we've got time for one more question, and that question is, and this talks about, more on the online aspect, or is asking about it anyway, is how do you engage remote employees? So you just shared a little bit about that, Cleo, but if, you and Lashika can provide some more information for how we can best do that.
Yes. So that is one of the biggest challenges that we have at TechSoup. We have several remote employees, and then we also have offices in other locations around the world. So there's an issue, there's a time issue there because we're in different time zones. And so when people are available, it varies. And so what we've committed to doing, because let me rewind, let me just back a little bit before I talk about what we're committed to doing. Let me tell you how we got to that point. We would have events, and we would schedule them at lunchtime. That seemed like a perfect idea because we wanted to make sure that everyone could participate. So lunchtime, that's the best time. You're not missing out any work. You can grab your lunch and come hang out and listen to this presentation. Perfect, but not so perfect for people who are in another time zone where it may be 12 o'clock in our office, but it's 9 p.m. where they are, and so we did receive feedback from employees that, they were disappointed. They wanted to participate or they wanted to be a part of some event, but they couldn't because of the time zone issue. So because of that, we really took a step back to say, okay, what can we do? We're just not really sure where to go from here. We thought we were really being accommodating by offering Zoom, having a Zoom meeting so everyone could join. But we decided to go a little bit further than that. So in addition to making sure that every single event that we have, it also is accompanied with a Zoom link. That's number one. The other thing that we decided to do was to change our event time. So instead of focusing on 12 o'clock, now we still do host events around lunchtime in our San Francisco office, and we do offer like a Zoom link or a recording, after the event with our other offices. But what we've also decided to do is to move our presentations early in the morning. We realized that if we had an event at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, now granted, yes, that kind of puts people in an interesting situation, especially being here in San Francisco. That's when a lot of people get their day started. So for us to have a presentation early in the morning, while it's beneficial for everyone to participate, around the globe, then sometimes people couldn't participate because it was so early. So it's like, so no matter what you put in place, not everyone is going to be satisfied. But we realized that by being aware and being intent on having these meetings, we're really able now to accommodate all of our employees. So not only are we moving our meetings to early in the day, if it's some type of a training or if it's a special guest speaker, we're also committed to having the presenters to present twice if they're able. Now, that may be a stretch for some presenters. Hey, I'm going to be here at 8 o'clock. I don't want to have to stay around and present again. But believe it or not, you will meet some very generous presenters who would be willing to do that. The other thing that we've decided to do is if we do have an event early in the day, we will record that and share that with our other offices and maybe kind of have help them to facilitate kind of like a watch party.
Love it. Oh, those are some great tips. There's so many more things to do, and it's just about trying them. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's been really cool to see all these initiatives unfold at TechSoup, and really excited to see what all of you try at your organizations, or just even advice, tips, things that we can try at TechSoup. We're all ears. So with that, keep that coming in and those questions. And if we didn't get to your question, we will be able to follow up with them post-webinar. So don't you fret. We really value the time and attention that you've given this webinar. And moving on, and my slides are just acting a little funny here. There we go. So if you can share one thing you learned today, but more specifically, we would love to know which idea that you heard on this webinar that you plan to implement or excited to try at least. We would love to know that. Please add that to the chat box. Also, we would very much appreciate it if you could fill out our post-event survey. That feedback really helps us to plan content. You'll be receiving a link to that after you close out of this webinar. And lastly, just to follow us on social media. That's where we post new webinars, blog posts, and just all of our other great learnings that we want to make sure we share with our TechSoup community. And of course on our blog, blog.techsoup.org. We've got some upcoming webinars as well. March 5th, one on QuickBooks Online for new nonprofit users, and then one on March 10th on Data and Perception, how American Cancer Society uses surveys to increase engagement. And as I mentioned, all of our past webinars can be found at TechSoup.org/community-events. And again, just wanted to share that, TechSoup is more than just a place to get discounted software. We also offer a range of solutions and services such as TechSoup courses with courses on Google Analytics, on design, tech training, Microsoft Office 365, and the list goes on. We'll include this link for the full catalog, and also TechSoup services with things like help desk, managed IT, and cloud implementation. And on the courses, you can use this discount code here, FY20Web10, to get 10% off a TechSoup course of your choice. And we will end there. Thank you so much, Lashika. Thank you, Cleo, for sharing your time and insights with us.
Thank you.
And yeah, we look forward to seeing your comments and to seeing your responses on the survey. Thanks so much, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Have a great day. Bye-bye.